Hello, Professor. This is Manan Choudhary from Group 13. I worked on the big data project name as Ebb&Flo, and the project name was MyEndoMD. The Ebb&Flo was the company that gave us the project, and this is my recording for the closeout presentation. And I'll be presenting the schedule, the risk, and all the other contents as we go through the slides. Firstly, I want to give an introduction about what Ebb&Flo and what the project was about. Ebb&Flo is the health and biotechnological company creating a new health paradigm for chronic care. Ebb&Flo's chronic solutions set the standard for health equity, transparency, and efficacy. It aims to support everyone with personalized end-to-end care that is seamless, connecting one to diagnostic, telehealth, pharmacy services, and everything else that they might need to manage their chronic illness. So basically, in this project, they wanted us to develop something for Alzheimer's and people suffering from that disease and around that disease. And as we move forward, I will discuss more about the company and what the aim of the whole project was. Moving forward, first is a project scope statement. So the project is in its initial research phase. So it is a whole new idea and it's kind of a startup by the company on a new project. And the aim of the project is to find appropriate data sets and techniques to map EHR data. EHR here means electronic health records, and the type of data is preferably voice or speech based to measure to measurable parameters which can be further utilized to generate user specific post visit content for the user. It aims to provide appropriate post visit content, help understand and deal with chronic illnesses without long wait times and thus saving critical time. So, if I put it in simple words, it's kind of a solution or suggestion giving application that would work to provide initial help to the patient based on their post like probable symptoms. So the scope deliverable were like me, and we had five scopes in which we achieved most of them except for one thing that was ruled out in one of the meetings. First was finding data sets on telephonic conversation EHR records. So this was our base on which we started working and forming logics and all the algorithms. So the team and us worked together and team and the client worked together to find data sets that would work out for sorting out data for, and the data was basically based on the symptoms and the speech systems that the patient gave. For example, it is a conversation with the patient, what are the issues they are facing, what are the symptoms that they are seeing, and based on that they are picking out keywords from that data set, and that comes in the algorithm part. Nextly, they had to study different models to map the data into data sets to appropriate features. In this, we worked with the client. The client had some keywords beforehand, and we worked on modifying that and providing appropriate algorithm. We didn't provide any features for the model because that would be a high-end thing that was not under the umbrella of the skills of the team. First initial thought was that we had to provide a basic design, but that was ruled out later on as we had more conversations with the client. Further add data to the client's data dictionary with medication values. So this was the main thing, the keyword thing that we delivered to the client. We added more keywords to it and data recognition patterns so that the client can move ahead with identifying symptoms and providing remedies. And the last open end scope item was a basic implementation of the selected model. We achieved only 40% of it. We didn't provide a fully functional model, and we achieved a proof of concept of the application and delivered it to the client. Moving on, this was the schedule and the work breakdown structure we had. So first of all, we developed scope statement. And before I go ahead with the task details, I want to give the brief of what is happening in this table. So we had a few planned duration, and we also noted down how many actual days it took to do the task. Sorry, the first one was developing a scope statement on all the deliverables. So whatever we developed in the previous slide, and all the brainstorming meetings and all that happened regularly, we planned to develop it in 80 days, but we took 20 days in reality. Next was the major task of researching. As it was like a startup, we had many research tasks, and the four major tasks it revolved around was data collection on the natural language processing model, the post-visit content collection, and researching on electronic health records because the team didn't had a healthcare background, so they had to research what are electronic health records and how do they function. And we did more research on the NLP models to build out the algorithm. So altogether, the research was planned to take 38 days, but we took 4 days extra to do that too, and it ended up at 48 days. This 42 days, sorry. So this is just a sum of all these four tasks. And next we had the requirements phase, in which we collected data about data about the data sets and all the research functioning. And this had many in and out meetings with the client as we had to understand the keywords and the data dictionary provided by the client. It took less days than we planned, and it got completed in just under a week. The next was design phase, in which we started up on our algorithms. We put a basic algorithm, discussed it with client, and then moved on to refining that in the development phase, in which we gave an initial algorithm and a proof of concept. This total took us 32 days, which was much higher than we planned. Like it was 8 days more than what we actually planned, like a week more. And then we moved on to the testing phase and then the release phase, which went according to the plan. So in total, the project didn't go much out of schedule, and we just took like 4 extra days to complete the whole project. This total is not the actual days in concurrent because many of the tasks ran in parallel by the few teammates. So, for example, the initial algorithm and proof of concept was running in parallel by a few teammates. So, this 131 is the total number of days that if we combine the tasks going on one after the other, but many tasks were going in simultaneous. But uh, in and out the 4 month period time that we 6 month period time basically, and including the rest 2 months of developing the scope and all, we were on schedule and just took like 4 days above as we planned. Next, moving on, we had the high level risk. So basically many of the risks were realized, like there were many team discrepancies. Like one of the team member had a medical issue, in which we faced his absence for like 2 weeks. But for that, we came up with a plan of updating him, having a regular meeting that called in for extra hard work, but we sorted that out. And we had all of the risk response strategies in place. Most of it went for mitigation of the risk. Like we had breaches in communication with the client, and we couldn't communicate well with the client because the client had issues connecting back at major intervals. And for that, we had to come up with a strategy of doing initial work and submitting small deliverables rather than doing a big deliverable. As in the first 2 months, we faced an issue that whenever we did the work and we waited for a client response, we went ahead with continuing the ideology that we started with. But then the client asked us for many reworks that consumed most of our times, and that's why we couldn't deliver much on one of the scope items that we wanted to add features to the model. And also, we couldn't give much further details to the proof of concept that we delivered due to delayed communications and all the reworks we had to do based on the feedback of the clients. So coming back to risk, these are one of the few high level risks. Like team discrepancies was one of the high level, and unable to achieve target goals was one of the high risk that we perceived because the items were out of the umbrella of the knowledge area that the team had, and even I as a manager had. So we considered them as high risk, but our avoidance and mitigation strategies were kept in place and they worked well. Not fully achieved, but fully achieved the potential, but they worked out well. And these were some few low level risks that we sorted out here and then in just a 1 day time. I would not go through all of them, and now since the project is complete, all of them are closed. These are the cost estimates. These are not the fully actual because the project didn't ask for any cost estimate and we worked as students. But here is a basic estimate. If we would have worked professionally in a scenario, then we worked as like $40 as an internal labor rate for all the team members, as it can be considered as we can be considered as software engineers, and this is the average salary of that. External labor rate are basically of the and external labor rates are that of the project manager, considering me and all the sponsor and stakeholders, like from the professor and also the client and the work they did. So the total estimate came out to be 32,000, and with the reserve, it includes the reserve of 2,942, and total internal cost of the team was coming out to be approximately 25, and the external work of the stakeholders and the project manager came around 4,000, or you can say 5,000. Non-labor costs were basically of getting the licenses. This project was in its research phase, we had more of collecting the data and not developing much of it. So most of the costs were basic of licenses, like few of the articles that we wanted to research for, or any client side specific certifications that we used or licenses that we used. So considering that, it was just a non-labor cost. Originally it was not that much, and we gave an estimate thinking of all the licenses that the future team could also use. And this is the month-wise distribution. Since it was a two-term project, we started with the scope on the first 2 months, and therefore the costs are not very high. Then the cost shoot up as we go on researching and developing the whole deliverables. That's why the cost increases as the team put in more labor into the project. And here, as we move into the development phase, we can see a spike in the cost. There is a downward trend when it comes to the release phase, as there was not much cost and labor needed in that period of time. Here we needed even the help in the fifth month. We need the help of the project manager, the client, and it was the time of heavy involvement from every corner. So that's why you have the highest cost here. And then it went out to the testing phase where we faced all the issues and errors and tried to correct it from all ends, even including the project manager. And then there is the final 8 month cost, where we did most of the rework due to the delayed client communication. And this is when the client also was in our we had the most meetings with the clients too. Moving on forward. So this is the conclusion. Like, so I have distributed it amongst the four areas that we all worked on. So the scope delivered, 85% of the scope delivers were achieved. And in the lesson learned meeting, we came out that we should now, if we move on forward doing any project, a research project like this, we should only plan on specific deliverables whose requirements could be defined before documenting them, and hence avoiding under delivery. So we promise less and deliver more. So that would be our future goals. On the project schedule and WBS, we achieved most of the tasks that we defined in the WBS, the work breakdown structure, and 94% it was effective. There was only a difference of about 5 days in the total timeline, which we can simply improve by adding more scale tasks and having better communication with the client, so that we can achieve under the days we promised. The risk management was quite less effective as it turned out, because than we planned. It was 85% effective as multiple risks turned into issues, and we faced many communication gap and all the other issues, but many of them didn't turn into issues, and 85% was the success rate we had. Cost estimates cannot be analyzed on a performance, as this was just a round up number based on the real issue. And since there was no major changes in the schedule, so there were no external procurements and there was no external sourcing, so the cost was in control as we planned. That is from my end. Thank you and have a good day, Professor.